Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez began crying during her grandmother's phone call from the hospital bed, knowing that the most important vote of her congressional career was only hours away. "Mija, sometimes the heart knows what the mind cannot see," said 89-year-old Abuela Clara. Those words would change AOC's most crucial political decision and remind America that the deepest wisdom often comes from the people who love us most. Tell us in the comment, are you watching from your living room during family time, at home after calling your own grandparents, or maybe while thinking about the wisdom your family has shared with you? We want to know where our viewers are tuning in from around the country as we dive into this incredible story of family love guiding political leadership. The call came at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, 3 hours before the final vote on the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act that would determine the fate of $1.2 trillion in federal spending. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez sat in her congressional office, surrounded by policy briefs, amendment proposals, and the weight of a decision that had consumed her thoughts for weeks. Her phone buzzed with an international number she recognized immediately, the hospital in San Juan where her grandmother Clara had been recovering from pneumonia. "Abuela?" AOC answered, her voice immediately shifting from the political tension that had defined her recent days to the warmth she reserved for family conversation. "Mija," came the familiar voice, weaker than usual but carrying the unmistakable strength that had guided AOC through childhood challenges and adult triumph. "I know you're busy with your important work, but I needed to hear your voice before the vote tomorrow." AOC's throat tightened with emotion. Her grandmother had been following her congressional career with the fierce pride of someone who had sacrificed everything to ensure her family could achieve dreams that had been impossible for previous generations. Clara Ocasio had worked multiple jobs throughout her life, sent money to family members in need, and maintained her dignity through hurricanes, economic hardship, and health challenges that would have broken lesser spirit. "How are you feeling, Abuela?" "The doctor said your breathing was improving," AOC said, trying to keep worry from her voice while simultaneously scanning the legislative documents that demanded her attention. "My body is tired, Mika, but my mind is clear," Clara replied with a soft chuckle. "Clear enough to know that you're struggling with something important. I can hear it in your voice, the same way I could when you were little and trying to decide whether to tell me about trouble at school." AOC paused, surprised by her grandmother's perceptiveness despite the physical distance and her medical condition. The infrastructure bill had indeed become a source of profound internal conflict that had kept her awake for nights and strained her relationships with both progressive allies and moderate Democrats who needed her vote to pass the legislation. The bill represented the largest federal investment in infrastructure in decades, promising to create millions of jobs, repair crumbling roads and bridges, expand broadband access to rural communities, and address climate change through clean energy investment. For most Democrats, supporting the legislation was obvious. It fulfilled campaign promises and delivered tangible benefits to constituents. But for AOC, the bill had become a moral battlefield. Progressive organizations argued that supporting infrastructure spending without simultaneously passing the larger Build Back Better Act would allow moderate Democrats to abandon social programs that addressed inequality, climate justice, and economic fairness. They urged her to vote against the infrastructure bill as leverage to ensure passage of more comprehensive legislation. The political calculations were complex and consequential. AOC's vote could determine whether the bill passed or failed, potentially affecting President Biden's legislative agenda, Democratic electoral prospects, and her own standing within the progressive movement that had elevated her to national prominence. "Abuela, there's this vote tomorrow," AOC began hesitantly, unsure how to explain congressional politics to someone whose wisdom came from life experience rather than political theory. "It's about fixing roads and bridges, creating jobs, but some people think I should vote against it to get other things we need." Clara listened quietly, the kind of patient attention that had made her AOC's most trusted confidant throughout childhood and adolescence. "Tell me more, Mija. What does your heart say about helping people with jobs and better roads?" "My heart says those things are important," AOC admitted, her voice growing stronger as she articulated feelings she had struggled to express in political meetings. "But my mind says that voting yes might prevent other important things from happening. Things that help families like ours. Programs for children and healthcare and climate change." "Ah," Clara said softly, You're trying to be so smart that you're forgetting to be wise. The gentle rebuke stung because AOC recognized its truth. She had spent weeks analyzing political strategies, consulting polling data, and weighing electoral consequences, but she had lost touch with the fundamental question of what would actually help people like her grandmother who needed both infrastructure improvements and social programs. What do you mean, Abuela? AOC asked, setting aside her policy documents and giving her grandmother her full attention for the first time in weeks. When I was young in Puerto Rico, we had a neighbor who spent so much time planning the perfect garden that she never planted anything, Clara began, her voice taking on the storytelling rhythm that had captivated AOC during childhood visits. She researched soil conditions, studied seed catalogs, and debated the optimal planting schedule while her family went hungry. Meanwhile, her sister planted what she could, when she could, and fed her children with imperfect vegetables that grew anyway. AOC smiled despite her emotional turmoil, recognizing the parable structure that her grandmother used to convey complex truths through simple story. Which sister's family ate better, Abuela? The one who planted, mija. Perfection is the enemy of progress, and people are hungry now. The metaphor resonated deeply with AOC's personal experience. Her grandmother had never waited for perfect conditions to help family members in need, contribute to community organizations, or make sacrifices that improved life for the next generation. Clara's approach to challenges had always been practical and immediate. Do what you can with what you have when you can do it. But Abuela, what if helping people now makes it harder to help them more later? AOC asked, articulating the core of her political dilemma. Clara was quiet for a moment, and AOC could hear the soft beeping of medical equipment in the background, a reminder of her grandmother's fragility and the preciousness of their conversation. Mija, do you remember when Hurricane Maria hit Puerto Rico? Of course, AOC replied. The devastating 2017 storm had become a defining moment in her political consciousness, highlighting government failures and inspiring her commitment to climate action and disaster preparedness. After the storm, we had no power, no water, limited food, Clara continued. Some people waited for the government to restore everything perfectly. Others shared what they had, helped neighbors, and slowly rebuilt what they could. Which approach saved more lives? The people who helped immediately, AOC acknowledged, beginning to understand her grandmother's perspective on the infrastructure vote. Sometimes, Mia, you cannot wait for the perfect solution when people need help today. The roads and bridges in your communities are broken now. The jobs are needed now. The broadband access that helps children learn is needed now. You cannot let the perfect become the enemy of the good. AOC felt tears beginning to form as her grandmother's words cut through weeks of political complexity to reveal fundamental truths about service and leadership. But what about the other programs, Abuela? The child care and health care and climate investments that families need. Those fights don't end with one vote, Mika, Clara said firmly. Your job is not to solve everything in one bill. Your job is to solve what you can solve when you can solve it. Then keep fighting for the rest. That's how change really happens. One step at a time, with persistence and faith. The conversation continued for another hour, with Clara sharing stories from her own life that illustrated the difference between strategic thinking and paralyzing perfectionism. She described decisions to leave Puerto Rico for better opportunities, to work multiple jobs while raising children, and to support family members through education despite financial hardship. None of these decisions had been perfect, but they had moved the family forward. Your grandfather used to say that leadership is not about making perfect decisions, Clara reflected as their conversation neared its end. Leadership is about making good decisions with good intentions and then working to make them better. You cannot serve people you are afraid to disappoint. As AOC prepared to end the call, her grandmother offered one final piece of guidance that would stay with her through the difficult hours ahead. Mia, sometimes the heart knows what the mind cannot see. Your mind sees all the reasons to wait, all the risks of imperfection. Your heart sees people who need help now. Trust your heart, but use your mind to make that help as effective as possible. After hanging up, AOC sat in her office for a long time, processing the conversation and its implications for her vote. Her grandmother's wisdom had not eliminated the political complexities surrounding the infrastructure bill, but it had provided a framework for navigating those complexities based on values rather than calculations. The next morning, AOC arrived at the Capitol with newfound clarity about her decision. She spent the early hours before the vote consulting with colleagues not to debate political strategy, but to discuss how the infrastructure bill could be implemented most effectively to help working families and marginalized communities. During the final debate on the House floor, AOC stood to speak, her remarks drawing on both policy expertise and personal reflection. "Mr. Speaker, I rise today thinking about my grandmother who taught me that perfect is the enemy of good and that our job is not to solve everything at once, but to solve what we can when we can solve it." She outlined her support for the infrastructure bill while acknowledging its limitations, pledging to continue fighting for the additional social programs and climate investments that communities needed. Her speech was personal and substantive, connecting abstract policy discussions to real human experiences and family values. The vote was closer than expected, with several progressive Democrats ultimately supporting the bill after AOC's public endorsement provided political cover for their decisions. The legislation passed with a narrow margin, triggering celebrations among infrastructure advocates and mixed reactions from progressive organizations that had opposed the bill. But the most meaningful response came in a text message from Puerto Rico an hour after the vote. "Proud of you, mija. Your grandfather would be proud too. Abuela." The media coverage of AOC's vote focused heavily on the political implications and her break with progressive strategy, but interviews with her grandmother provided a different perspective on the decision. Clara Ocasio's comments to a Spanish-language news outlet were simple and direct. "My granddaughter voted with her heart for people who need help. That's what we taught her to do." The infrastructure bill's passage led to immediate benefits for AOC's district and constituencies across the country. Road repair projects created local jobs, broadband expansion connected rural families to educational and economic opportunities, and clean energy investments began addressing climate concerns that had motivated much of AOC's political career. More importantly for AOC personally, the experience of prioritizing family wisdom over political strategy strengthened her confidence in value-based decision-making. Subsequent votes and policy positions reflected a clearer integration of personal principles with political effectiveness, earning respect from colleagues who had sometimes viewed her as overly ideological. The relationship with her grandmother also deepened through their shared experience of navigating difficult decisions with integrity and courage. Clara's health improved following her pneumonia recovery, and she began participating in video calls with AOC's congressional staff, sharing stories and perspectives that enriched their understanding of the communities they served. The broader impact extended beyond AOC's individual political development. Her willingness to prioritize practical progress over perfect ideology inspired other progressive politicians to reconsider their approaches to compromise and incremental change. The infrastructure bill became a model for how principled politicians could support imperfect legislation while continuing to advocate for comprehensive solutions. Democratic leadership noted AOC's evolution from rigid ideological positions to more nuanced strategic thinking, leading to increased inclusion in legislative negotiations and policy development. Her grandmother's influence had inadvertently enhanced AOC's effectiveness as a political leader while maintaining her commitment to progressive values. The story also resonated with voters who appreciated the authenticity of family-guided decision-making in an era of calculated political positioning. AOC's openness about her grandmother's influence humanized her public image and demonstrated the importance of intergenerational wisdom in contemporary politics. Clara Ocasio became something of a political celebrity in her own right, with media outlets seeking her perspectives on current events and her granddaughter's career. Her interviews consistently emphasized themes of patience, persistence, and practical progress that had guided her family through decades of challenges. The infrastructure bill itself proved successful in delivering promised benefits, validating AOC's decision to support immediate progress while continuing to advocate for additional programs. The legislation's popularity among voters strengthened Democratic electoral prospects and created political momentum for subsequent social spending initiatives. Most significantly, AOC's experience demonstrated the value of maintaining strong family relationships and personal values in high-pressure political environments. Her grandmother's grandmother's wisdom had provided an anchor point that enabled principled decision-making despite competing pressures and conflicting advice from political allies. The lesson resonated far beyond congressional politics, inspiring other public figures to seek guidance from family members and community elders who offered perspectives unavailable through traditional political channels. The story became a reminder that effective leadership often requires balancing strategic thinking with fundamental human values. For AOC personally, the experience reinforced her commitment to staying connected to the communities and families that had shaped her values. Regular conversations with her grandmother became a cornerstone of her decision-making process, providing both emotional support and practical wisdom for navigating complex political challenges. The legacy of Clara Ocasio's influence extended beyond her granddaughter's political career to inspire broader conversations about the role of family wisdom in public service. Her simple truth that sometimes the heart knows what the mind cannot see became a guiding principle for politicians seeking to balance competing demands while maintaining their integrity and effectiveness. In the end, AOC's grandmother had provided exactly what she needed most. Not political strategy or tactical advice, but a reminder of the fundamental values that had motivated her entry into politics and the importance of trusting those values when making difficult decisions that affect real people's lives. Click subscribe to see more stories of family wisdom guiding political leadership and personal courage. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in our next video. God bless you, and God bless America.